Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Javad Tehami and these are the headlines. Israeli police have once again stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque compound and fired tear gas at Palestinian worshippers. The latest raid comes hours after a ceasefire in Gaza, following 11 days of an Israeli military campaign that killed 243 Palestinians, including 66 children. At least 6 people have been killed and 14 injured in a bomb blast in Pakistan's Balochistan province. The provincial spokesperson says the explosion took place at a pro-Palestine rally in Chaban city near the Afghan border. Police say the bomb, which was attached to a motorcycle, targeted the vehicle of a religious party leader. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the day is not far when Palestinians will get an independent state. In a televised message on Palestine Solidarity Day, Khan said public opinion is changing and now Western politicians and media are calling out Israel for its aggression in Gaza. He said Islamabad has always stood by Palestinians at all forums. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg says Russia still has more troops in and around Ukraine than before the recent escalation. Speaking at a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris, Stoltenberg called for a peaceful resolution of the tensions between Moscow and Kiev. Major drug makers and rich nations have pledged billions of doses of the coronavirus vaccines for poorer countries at a G20 health summit in Rome. The summit was aimed at addressing the unequal distribution of vaccines to curb the pandemic, which has infected over 165 million people worldwide. More than 3.4 million deaths have officially been attributed to the disease, but the WHO has said the death toll from direct and indirect effects of the pandemic might be at least 2 to 3 times higher than officially reported. The International Olympic Committee has reiterated that the Games would be safer for participants and would not burden Japan's health services. The country is facing mounting pressure from the public to cancel or further postpone the Games due to the coronavirus pandemic. Meanwhile, the French sports minister has said President Emmanuel Macron will attend the opening ceremony of the Games, set to start in July. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Israeli police have once again stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque compound and fired tear gas at Palestinian worshippers. This comes hours after Israel and Hamas agreed to an Egyptian brokered ceasefire to halt 11 days of violence in the Gaza Strip. At least 243 Palestinians, including 66 children, have been killed in the Israeli bombing. More in this report.
Has breathed a sigh of relief as the Gaza ceasefire cautiously took hold in the early hours of Friday. Thousands poured onto the streets in the Palestinian territories to celebrate the truce. UK Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says all sides must work to end the unacceptable cycle of violence. The European Council says the opportunity for peace and security for citizens must be seized. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called on global leaders to develop a reconstruction package that supports the Palestinians. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden says the ceasefire is a genuine opportunity for progress.
The United States committed to working with the United Nations, and we remain committed to working with the United Nations and other international stakeholders to provide rapid humanitarian assistance and to marshal international support for the people of Gaza and the Gazan reconstruction efforts.
Cairo has also announced to send 2 delegations to monitor the ceasefire. Israel and Hamas have both warned that they are ready to retaliate to any truce violations by the other. Hamas has demanded that Tel Aviv must end the violence in Jerusalem, as well as address the damages in Gaza.
We told the mediators in Egypt, Qatar, and the UN the demands of Palestinians. The Palestinians are protecting Al-Aqsa Mosque and stopping the violation by the settlers. The other thing is Sheikh Jarrah. This is a red line. And the last thing is to stop aggression against Gaza and also repairing damage by the aggression on the people of Gaza in the West Bank and Jerusalem.
Even as the truce takes hold, the fate of families facing forceful expulsion from their homes in Jerusalem's Sheikh Jarrah town is far from certain.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the day is not far when Palestinians will get an independent state. In a televised message on Palestine Solidarity Day, Khan said public opinion is changing and now Western politicians and media are calling out Israel for its aggression in Gaza. He said the public pressure will force Israel to end its atrocities in Palestine. Khan said Islamabad has always stood by Palestinians at all forums. His remarks came as rallies and demonstrations were held across the country to condemn Israel's bombardment of Gaza. In Pakistan, at least 6 people have been killed and 14 others injured in a bomb blast in southwestern Balochistan province. The provincial spokesperson says the explosion took place during a Palestine solidarity rally in Chaman city near the Afghan border. Police said the bomb, which was attached to a motorcycle, targeted the vehicle of a religious party leader, but he remained unharmed in the attack. The area has been sealed and an emergency has been imposed in local hospitals to treat the injured. NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg has said Russia still has more troops in and around Ukraine than before the recent escalation. Speaking at a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris, the NATO chief called for a peaceful resolution of the tensions between Moscow and Kiev. Relations between Moscow and Kiev collapsed after Russia annexed the Ukrainian region of Crimea in 2014, and Russian-backed separatists took control of a chunk of eastern Ukraine. Tensions have again flared in recent months after Russia massed troops on its western border with Ukraine and Crimea following an uptick in fighting. Major drug makers and rich nations have pledged billions of doses of coronavirus vaccines for poorer countries at a G20 health summit in Rome. Meanwhile, India has registered more than 4,200 coronavirus deaths and over 259,000 new cases in the past 24 hours. Globally, there are over 3.4 million fatalities and more than 165 million cases. More in this report.
India's battle against the deadly COVID-19 pandemic is taking a turn for the worse with every passing day. Christians in India are cremating their dead for the first time as they have to wait for hours in long queues for burials, increasing the risk of the spread of infection. The country's health authorities are warning that states should declare an epidemic following a rise in deadly black fungus cases. The normally rare infection, called mucormycosis, has a mortality rate of 50%, while some patients are only saved by removing an eye or jawbone.
My friend who's suffering from the black fungus infection had surgery 3 days back and his jaw was removed. The doctor has also said that they need to remove his eye as well to save his life. But I'm facing problems for 3 days for injection. The government has overtaken the medicine outlets, and this hospital says that they also have 70 patients for whom they need the medicine. Do we let our patient die?
Public Health England says weekly cases of Indian variant in the UK rose by 160%. BioNTech claims the vaccine it developed with Pfizer is up to 75% effective in protecting against the strain. The World Health Organization has urged caution and even warned against international travel in the face of uncertainties regarding the variant that has now been detected in Brazil too. Meanwhile, the latest wave has caught Argentina off guard as daily cases spiked from about 5,000 in early March to a record 35,000 this week.
Quedarán suspendidas las actividades.
Social, economic, educational, religious, and sports activities will be suspended in person. Essential shops will be enabled, shops with home deliveries and takeaway. It will only be possible to circulate in the vicinity from home between 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. each day, and exceptionally authorized people may circulate.
Australia's troubled vaccine rollout has hit a potentially stumbling block, as vaccine hesitancy among the population hit an all-time high.
Pakistan has recorded 102 more deaths from coronavirus over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the virus has claimed 20,089 lives in the country so far. It said more than 3,000 people have tested positive for the virus overnight. The number of infections has surpassed 893,000, of which over 810,000 have recovered. The ministry says there are more than 63,000 active cases. It says more than 4,400 patients are in critical condition. Indian troops continue their violent cordon and search operations in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This comes after the Hurriyat chairman called for a march to pay tribute to martyred Kashmiri leaders. Troops launched operations in Srinagar, Pulwama, Poonch and Baramulla, among other areas. Indian forces have carried out extrajudicial murders of hundreds of Kashmiri civilians in such operations. The occupied valley has been under a crippling military siege amid a severe third wave of COVID-19. After revoking the valley's special status in 2019, India beefed up its already large military presence there. A court in India has acquitted a former top news magazine editor of charges he sexually harassed and raped a colleague. The 80-year-old case raised questions over the safety of Indian women in the workplace. The special public prosecutor says they are seriously aggrieved and plan to appeal. Police say Tarun Tejpal assaulted a woman staffer in a hotel elevator during a conference in the coastal state of Goa in 2013. The complainant cannot be identified under the Indian law. No comment was immediately available from her or her lawyers. In India, an Air Force pilot has died after his MiG-21 fighter aircraft crashed near Moga city in the northern state of Punjab. The Indian Air Force says the aircraft was on a routine training sortie when the accident occurred in Langiana village. In a tweet, it said a court of inquiry has been ordered to ascertain the facts. This is the third time a MiG-21 aircraft has crashed this year. One Indian pilot died in March while another ejected to safety in January. In Myanmar, clashes between anti-coup militias and the government forces continue. In Chin state, which is under martial law, the army has accused the militias of giving military training to protesters who want to take up arms. Pro-democracy activists have taken to the streets again, despite the killing of 810 people since the coup so far. Japan, one of the top donors to the country, has threatened to cut all funds if the situation does not improve. In an interview, Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi warned the junta to immediately end violence. Motegi said Tokyo has multiple sources to convey its commitment to democracy and called for the release of detainees. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Pakistan and China are marking the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. On this occasion, China's President Xi Jinping has extended warm congratulations to Pakistan.
In a letter to Pakistan's President Arif Alvi, she said the two countries are all-weather strategic cooperative partners. He said Pakistan and China stand firmly by each other on issues of core interest and major concerns. She said the trust and friendship between the two have gone through the test of 70 years of international changes. The president said the China-Pakistan economic corridor has achieved remarkable results. He said the project benefits both nations and adds a strong impetus to regional prosperity. She said the ironclad friendship between the two countries was bolstered in the fight against COVID-19. Looking forward to the longevity of the Sino-Pak friendship, she wished prosperity and happiness for Pakistan and its people.
The Pakistan Air Force has formally handed over a consignment of 3 JF-17 aircraft to the Nigerian Air Force. They were developed by the Pakistan Aeronautical Complex Commodore. A ceremony was held at Nigeria's Makurdi Air Base for the induction of the aircraft. Addressing the ceremony, Nigerian Defence Minister Bashir Magashi expressed his gratitude to Pakistan. He thanked Islamabad for sustained cooperation to enhance Nigeria's security capabilities. Pakistan's Vice Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Syed Noman Ali, said the event has landmark importance for Islamabad's JF-17 program. U.S. President Joe Biden has signed a hate crimes bill to combat violence against Asian Americans into law. Biden condemned what he called the silence that let hate flourish. Several lawmakers attended the ceremony, one of the largest groups to visit the White House during the pandemic. The House approved the bill 364 to 62 this week, following the Senate's 94-1 vote in April. The new law will expedite Justice Department reviews of hate crimes by putting an official in charge of the effort. It also gives federal grants to local law enforcement agencies to improve their capacity to fight racial crimes. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on 2 Houthi military leaders for the offensive to seize Yemen's gas-rich Marib region. The State Department says the U.S. is promoting accountability for Houthi actions that undermine peace efforts. It accused Mohammed Abdul Karim al-Ghamari of orchestrating attacks that have harmed civilians. In a statement, the department said al-Ghamari took charge of the Marib offensive and attacks against Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, it also blacklisted Yusuf al-Madani as a specially designated global terrorist. It noted that al-Madani is the commander in al-Hudaydah, among other regions, and was assigned to target Marib. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has confirmed that America no longer wants to buy Greenland. This signals a change of policy from the Trump administration. Blinken visited the Danish Autonomous Territory as he ended a 4-day trip that included a meeting of the Arctic Council. He told reporters he was in Greenland because the U.S. values its partnership with the region. Former President Donald Trump had proposed buying the island from Denmark. This sparked diplomatic outrage after Denmark rejected the offer, calling it absurd. A Canadian court has ruled that the 2020 downing of a Ukrainian plane by Iran was an act of terrorism. The Superior Court of Justice of Ontario says on a balance of probabilities, the missile strikes were intentional. Iran did not defend itself in the court to refute the plaintiff's evidence, making this a default judgment. The ruling paves the way for victims' families in Canada to seek damages for the death of their loved ones. Ottawa will soon enter into negotiations with Iran on reparations. All 76 passengers on PS 752 flight were killed, including 85 Canadian citizens and permanent residents. Bosnia's top court has indicted 8 former Serbian soldiers for crimes against humanity over the alleged murder of 78 Muslim civilians in the 1990s Bosnian War. The court said the defendants are accused of persecuting the Bosniak population on national, ethnic, and religious grounds. The victims' bodies were transported by trucks and buried in a mass grave from which they were exhumed in 1996. There has been no comment from the side of the defendants, some of whom are believed to be in Serbia. The three-year war was marked by the persecution and the killings of Croats and Bosniaks in territories the Serbs had mapped out for their state. The African Union has called for a democratic transition in Chad. Within 18 months, Chad's military leadership took charge of the country in April after President Idriss Déby's death. The new government appointed a transitional civilian leadership and promised to hold elections within 18 months. In a statement, the African Union categorically rejected any form of extension of the transition period. The remarks by the Union come as fears grow over silent dictatorship in Chad. Citizens have taken to the streets in Chad saying they want democracy sooner. More than 6,500 migrants out of nearly 8,000 who had entered Spain's North African enclave of Ceuta earlier this week have been sent back to Morocco. Spanish Interior Minister Fernando Grande expressed hope that the diplomatic spat with Rabat will be over soon. Spain had accused Morocco of allowing a record 8,000 migrants to reach Ceuta, sparking a crisis that saw clashes on the Moroccan side of the border. However, calm returned to Ceuta on Thursday after Madrid moved quickly to deploy reinforcements and send most of the migrants back to Morocco. French artist JR has unveiled his latest art installation, which gives an impression of cliffs below the Eiffel Tower. The optical illusion shows the tower standing across a precipice between the two cliffs with its top cropped. The illusion is viewed perfectly from a certain angle, prompting a queue of visitors to take photos. JR unveiled his latest piece on the day restaurant terraces reopened and Parisians were eager to return to normalcy. He is known for huge format street art such as images of faces and eyes pasted on a favela in Rio de Janeiro. A 250-kilo sea wolf was hit by a vehicle in San Cristobal on the Galapagos on the Baquerizo Moreno Port Pier. Park rangers inspected the mammal and reported normal mobility with no evidence of injury to its body. However, they did not rule out internal injuries. Park technicians are gathering information on the incident for possible legal action. The sea wolf was reportedly dragged up to 20 meters by the car. The Galapagos Islands are home to a large variety of turtles, flamingos, albatrosses and cormorants. The archipelago was declared Natural Heritage of Humanity by the United Nations. UK's Prince William has accused the British Broadcasting Corporation of failing his mother, Princess Diana. Earlier, an inquiry found a journalist for the BBC deceitfully obtained the sensational 1995 interview with the princess. In a statement, William said the interview played a major part in worsening his parents' relationship. He alleged the BBC's failures contributed significantly to his mother's fear, paranoia and isolation. Prince Harry said bad media practices are still widespread. In a statement, he welcomed the inquiry as the first step towards justice and truth. Media Minister Oliver Dowden says the government will consider whether BBC needs further reform. In that interview, Diana had shocked the nation by admitting to an affair and sharing details of her failed marriage to Charles. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Another business updates. China says it has sincerely promoted bilateral cooperation with the European Union and hopes the bloc will meet at HOUTI. China's mission to the EU said the deal was mutually beneficial and not a favor from one side to the other. In a statement, the mission defended sanctions, saying they were a legitimate response to EU actions. Earlier, the bloc passed a resolution to freeze approval with 599 votes in favor, 30 votes against and 58 abstentions. It read China must lift the curbs before dealing with a comprehensive agreement on investment. The Wall Street stocks have risen at open, extending a recovery from the previous session. Bitcoin, which shook markets earlier in the week with a 30% collapse, was stable for a second day around the $40,000 range. The S&P 500 index traded 0.25% up, while DJI also gained over 0.5% at open. But the Nasdaq Composite Index opened marginally low, trading 0.1% down. Meanwhile, the oil prices climbed as investors braced for the return of Iranian crude supplies. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.